Hi, I'm Joe Pulitzi, and this is the Content Inc. podcast. 5 minutes every Monday for content creators who desire to be content entrepreneurs. Hello, happy holidays, happy new year. So wonderful to have you listening to this little podcast that we've been doing well over 300 episodes now. It's hard to believe. Started this back in 2014 and we're still going strong today. As hopefully a treat, I have a presentation that I gave at the Jeonji New Media Conference in October. This was in Korea, and I wasn't able to be there in person, but I did a virtual presentation, which I believe was received well. And I have 30 minutes of that presentation on the 7 ways to build a loyal audience using content marketing, using the Content Inc. model. And I'm going to share it with you today. So I hope you enjoy this. A little bit different than our 5 to 10 minute blitzes that we usually do, but hopefully this will be a nice change of pace. Without further ado, here is the presentation. Hello, my name is Joe Pulitzi. I'm very excited to present to you using content to grow a loyal audience in 7 steps. I'm very honored that you would invite me to be your keynote speaker at the Jeonji New Media Conference. I wanted to be there in Korea in person. Unfortunately, because of COVID-19 and the pandemic, I was not able to do so, maybe sometime in the future. But I'm honored to speak with you today, especially to the people in Korea. Of course, we've noticed the amazing storytelling and content creation from Squid Game, as well as Parasite, coming out of your country. And so you know a lot of what I'm going to talk about today, but I'm really going to get into a model that we've seen work with hundreds of companies from around the world. So I'm excited to talk to you about that concept today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Joe Pulitzi. I'm founder of a digital content news company called The Tilt. I'm author of 7 different books, 1 novel called The Will to Die. It's a mystery thriller. I'm probably best known for creating Content Marketing Institute in the United States. And we over there created the largest in-person event in the world around content marketing called Content Marketing World. And I'm also co-founder of a not-for-profit around speech therapy called the Orange Effect Foundation. I'm going to talk with you for about 30 minutes today. And then we're going to get into a few questions at the end of this presentation. But before I go through the first of the 7 steps, I want you to think about all the content that you're creating as an organization. All the things that you're creating that's not necessarily product and service related. All the blogs, all the podcasts, all the social media content going out. And if you stopped producing that content, would your customers notice? And it's a tough question to answer because, of course, you want to say, yes, our customers would notice we create amazing information. But the truth is, the majority of companies that we work with, they're not creating remarkable content. They're not building loyal audiences. And those audiences would never even notice if somebody stopped tweeting, stopped putting anything on Facebook, stopped blogging, whatever the case is. So why are we here today? You as an organization are creating more content than ever before. And at the same time, it's harder and harder to break through and actually build an audience and get attention because there's so much content clutter out there. So there's a better model. There's a better way than most of us are doing it. So we're going to go through those steps today. And the steps that I'm going to talk to you today about are called the Content Inc. model. So this is from my latest book. I'm going to go through these 7 steps. And these are the steps that the largest and most innovative media companies and content marketing examples in the world have used. Whether it's Financial Times or Red Bull Media House or New York Times or Disney, this is the model. And sometimes we forget that there's a really good way with results to build an audience. And just because we can create content doesn't mean we should. So we're going to go through some of those today. And the first one is the sweet spot. That's where we start. We're not creating content at first. We've got to build some kind of a strategy. So you're saying, okay, what is the sweet spot? The sweet spot is the intersection of your expertise, your knowledge and skill area as an individual or as an organization, matched on the other side with what is your audience's desire? What are their pain points? What keeps them up at night? So if you look at expertise, that's the knowledge and skill that sets you apart. And the desire is something that your audience really needs to know. So that's the sweet spot. So as we do an exercise and you figure out, and again, you are probably already creating lots of content. So it's good to go back and revisit. So just pretend for a moment that you're starting from square one and you're saying, okay, well, what can you do better than anyone else from an information standpoint, not your products and services? So you want to list, what are your knowledge areas? What are those special skills that you may have? And then when you go and you think about, okay, what are my audience's pain points? What keeps them up at night? What are some things that they really need information on to do their jobs better or to live better lives? These are the things that we want to figure out. So what can you fix with information, not with your product and service? So it's a very important question to ask yourself. Here's a case study from North America. This company is called Indium Manufacturing. They manufacture industrial soldering equipment. They had engineers that knew industrial soldering really, really well that were basically doing just engineering. They wondered, okay, could those engineers create amazing information? And they created this blog called From One Engineer to Another. So Indium's sweet spot was those engineers understood the complex processes that went in with soldering and soldering equipment. Well, their audience of engineers really needed to understand, how do I do soldering better? How do I integrate it into my business, into my manufacturing process? And of course, they're talking to these engineers. So that's where Indium starts. That's where they go from. And by the way, Indium's blog, From One Engineer to Another, it is the best lead generation form that they have in their marketing. So those 27 engineers that are blogging on a regular basis, they have a really good editor, by the way. So they're blogging on a regular basis. They're generating more new business for the organization than anything else that they do. So number 2, the content tilt is probably the most important thing we're going to talk about today. I like to think they're all important, but this is really important. So I'm going to share with you something. So let's say you go to your search engine and you type in cloud computing, and you will find Amazon and Oracle and Microsoft and IBM that will have their definitions of cloud computing. And what you'll find is they're all the same. They're all talking about the same thing in the same way, and it's identical content. Now, they have billions of dollars and they can do whatever they want with their content creation, but we can't afford to do that. We have to be really smart about how we're going to use our budget. So we have to do things that are going to break through all that clutter out there. And this is where, if you've watched the movie The Matrix, one of my favorite movies, this is the scene that you're looking at here on the slide deck, where Neo, who's the chosen one, goes in and he's going to meet the Oracle and hopefully have his destiny told for him. And he sees a little boy there, and the little boy there is bending spoons. And Neo doesn't know how the little boy is bending spoons. And then basically the boy says to Neo, there is no spoon. You have to look at things different. You can't just do it the same way everyone else does it. And of course, Neo tilts his head. That's where the content tilt comes from. He tilts his head and then says, oh, okay, I can bend the spoon, but I have to take a different perspective. I have to come at it from a different direction. So your content tilt is an area of little to no competition that gives you a chance to break through all that clutter. So if you're having a tough time building an audience, maybe you're just talking about your industry, you're talking to your audience the same way everyone else does. And then maybe you need to look at it a different way, kind of like they did with Squid Game, to break through all that clutter to build an audience. So here's an example. This example is from Sydney, Australia. This is Anne Reardon. She is known today as the baking queen of Sydney, Australia. She wanted to start a food blog. And she started that food blog in 2011. And by January 2012, she had 100 YouTube subscribers. She was very excited about this. And then today, she has more than 4 million subscribers around a content brand called How to Cook That. So how does Anne Reardon, with no resources, with no money, break through all the clutter and build a multi-million-dollar business around this brand, How to Cook That? Well, she does things like this. And she says, okay, well, can I build a perfect replica of a Nikon camera out of chocolate pieces? So that's one of her case studies that she has. Or can I take a bottle of Fanta and when you slice it in half, it's a multiple layer cake? Or maybe you want a Snickers bar, but instead of a regular Snickers bar, you want a Snickers bar that's 5 pounds in weight. These are the types of things that she would end up doing So let's look at her sweet spot. Ann Reardon's sweet spot, yes, she was a qualified food scientist, dietitian. She knows her stuff. Her audience, what do they want? They wanted step-by-step food recipes. But if Ann was just going to do the same old recipes as everyone else, she would never break through all that clutter and have 4 million subscribers. What did she do? Her content tilt was impossible dessert creations. No one at that time was doing the types of recipes that she did with impossible dessert creations. She broke through, she built an audience, and she was able to monetize that audience. So something that might help you as you're figuring this out is to create a content mission statement to unearth and figure out what your content tilt is. So let's look at this as a case study from Digital Photography School. Darren Rouse runs this. He created a content mission statement. If you go to the About Us page of Digital Photography School, you will find it. And what you figure out is his mission statement, and all content mission statements, just like an editorial mission statement for a media company, has 3 parts. A core target audience is 1. The second is, what are you going to deliver to that audience? And the third is, what is the outcome for the audience? So if you look at Darren's says, welcome to Digital Photography School, a website with simple tips to help digital camera owners get the most out of their cameras. So who's the target audience? Digital camera owners. What are we going to deliver? Simple tips. This is not long form content, very short bullet point numbered content. Number 3, what is the outcome for the audience? The most important, helping them get the most out of their cameras. Again, this is not rocket science, but this is what we have to do. And what we really want to do then is we want to make sure that that mission statement gets in front of our content team and we know what we're trying to do every time. In addition, if you have multiple audiences, you need a separate mission statement. So if you're trying to target multiple audiences at the same time with one mission statement, it's going to be very hard to build a loyal audience and then monetize that audience over time. So let's talk about a few different ways that you can differentiate with your content tilt. So one is by niching down the audience just a little bit. So let's say your audience are plant managers on a manufacturing floor. Maybe instead of just plant managers, you're going to say, okay, we're targeting plant managers at companies of 10,000 or more people who outsource their parts to India and China. Just a little bit more, you could say, okay, can we be the leading expert in the world on this topic to plant managers? The answer might be no. Can you be the leading expert on the world to plant managers who outsource parts to India and China? Maybe. So that's a good litmus test. Can you be the leading expert in the world on this topic? And that's the kind of bar we need to hit in order to break through all that clutter. Let's talk about story positioning or creating your own content category. When we started at Content Marketing Institute in around 2007, everyone called the practice of content marketing custom publishing or custom media. But we felt when we were targeting marketers, you had to call it something marketing. So we started to call it content marketing, and that really took off. So we didn't create the category. This stuff was going on, the art of telling a story and building an audience of what I'm talking to you about now. It was always a thing, but nobody called it content marketing. We said, it's called content marketing now. We put an entire blogging initiative behind it, and content marketing overtook custom publishing as the number one name in about 2011, 2012. And of course, our business took off because of it. Maybe it's a different platform. And I know you use many different platforms in Korea than we do in North America, but I know you're using Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Maybe there's a new platform that you can focus on that nobody's there yet. Like, for example, in the States, about a year ago, Clubhouse, the social audio platform, came onto the scene and everyone ran to Clubhouse. And some people made a really big splash because that was a new channel and they were the first movers there. So maybe there's an opportunity to be first mover on a Twitch or on one of the new emerging social media platforms that are coming out in Korea. Okay, so the first two, that's just strategy. That's all we've been talking about here is strategy. Now we're going to start creating some content. And this is the third step. And the third step is the base. The greatest media companies of all time start by just focusing on one platform. And we think, well, because our audiences are everywhere, that we need to create content everywhere as well. And the fact is, you actually don't want to do that. If you follow what Red Bull Media House has done, if you follow New York Times, if you follow the best, greatest, innovative media companies in Korea, what you will find is that they started by doing one thing really well. Red Bull Media House started with a print magazine. that they actually used to deliver at Formula One races. New York Times started with a print newsletter. TED Talk started with their in-person talk series. Huffington Post started with a blog to one audience. These are the things that we have to think about. We have to be focused, and then we diversify later, and we'll get to that later. So that's the biggest issue. We talked about the content tilt being really important, and it is, but where a lot of organizations fail is they diversify too quickly. So you'll be in your marketing meeting and you're like, what are we doing on this channel? We need to be doing podcasts. We need to be doing video. We need to be doing blogs. And the answer to that is no, you shouldn't be. You should be focused on something that you could be amazing. You don't want to just be mediocre. Let me give you an example of this, and I call this content energy. And it doesn't matter how much budget you have or what size company you are, you have a limited amount of content energy. So let's pretend that these chocolate bars, these pieces of chocolate bar, is the amount of content energy you have. What most companies do is they will say, okay, we're going to do a blog and a podcast and research and an email newsletter and social media and an event. And we spread out that content energy and we basically become mediocre, okay, at everything. And we're not excellent. We're not great at anything. And we don't break through, we don't build an audience, and we end up getting fired, and now you're in trouble, right? So what do we want to do? We want to take that. It doesn't have to be an e-newsletter and a podcast, but you have to take those resources and put it to one or two things that you can be amazing. It doesn't mean that you can't be active in those other platforms. It means you're focusing your storytelling on one or two. And you're going to use those other platforms to gain traction on those one or two platforms. And that's how you're going to break through. If you look at Procter & Gamble, when they created Homemade Simple, they started with an email newsletter and a blog. That's it. Now today they've got a television series and they've got multiple different kinds of products, and it's an amazing program, multi-million-dollar program, but they started very small, focusing on what they felt they could be great to get something that resonated with their audience. They were successful, and then they diversified. So that's what we have to focus on. If you look at, this is out of Europe, if you look at the case study, Yuska Bank, they're a bank. They started a video channel. They didn't do a blog. They didn't do a podcast. They didn't do an e-newsletter. They didn't do all these other things. They focused on just creating the number one television station in their country for banks, for financial services. And they've done really well and incredible. And they're probably the number one resource around that in Northern Europe. So if you look at what the formula is, who's the audience you're targeting? What's your content tilt? What's that differentiation area? One main content type. Is it audio? Is it video? Is it textual plus image? Something like that. And then one main platform. Is it a blog? Is it on Twitter? Is it on Instagram? Is it a Facebook group? Is it Snapchat? Whatever it is. YouTube, video, whatever. Is it an event series? Is it a print magazine, which I think are coming back? That's the formula we want to start with. Be great there, and then we diversify later. When you do that, you have to be consistent. This is another big mistake that most organizations make. If you look at somebody's YouTube channel or let's say their Facebook group, we sort of send out our content, distribute our content whenever we feel we've got something to say. We want to do a defined editorial calendar. We want to deliver on a regular basis. So if you have an email newsletter, you want to send that out at the same time and the same day every week as you send it up. So when we show up on time. And when we do, we're always interesting. Have to be. What gets a lot of organizations, they have too much sales information in their content. So what we have to do is not be so salesy and focus on the needs of our audience, and we will do much better. When we launched Content Marketing Institute, we did one post a day for 11 years, folks. That's how we built 250,000 subscribers, and that's how we built the number one event in content marketing in the world. That's how you do it. It took us 22 months of that kind of blogging to really start to see significant return on investment. So it does take time to do this, but when you do it, then you build an asset. And if you have an asset, you can monetize that in multiple ways, and we'll talk about that in a second. So the first three, the sweet spot, the content tilt, the base, and now we're getting into full-blown audience building. So I just want to say this. So this is Caterpillar. They're a large industrial equipment supplier. They have a Facebook page. Like I'm sure many of you have a Facebook page. And that Facebook page in this case has 1.8 million people that follow and like this page. Now, whose audience is that 1.8 million people? Is that Caterpillar's? No. Is that Facebook's? Absolutely. Is Caterpillar renting space at that moment? Absolutely they are. So it's scary. It's a scary business model. Of course, we know about Facebook's algorithms. They're not letting us present as much content. They're, if you send out a post, if you're lucky, half of 1% might see that post if you have a business page. We have to do better. We can absolutely use social media, but we want to do better and focus on subscribers as our key metric, not followers or fans. We want to move those followers or fans into something that we call subscribers, and we want to move them up the subscriber hierarchy. What does that mean? That means we're taking them from rented land like Facebook and Instagram and moving them to owned properties. That might be an owned membership site. It could be an email newsletter. It could be SMS, some print subscribers, something that we have more control over the data and the distribution schedule. If you're looking at just about every other social media property, they control the algorithm, they control the data, and we're renting land, we're leasing property. And if we build our following on rented land, it's like fixing up a house that we're renting. Who does that help? It helps the owner. It doesn't help you. So if you think, here's a good, here's a really good case study, again, from Europe. Charlotte LeBay creates an organization called Brain Balance. She first built her audience of over 50,000 followers on Instagram. She was concerned. She's like, I can't control that audience. What did she do? She started to move that audience over to an email subscription list. Now she has more than 50,000 subscribers in email, and she's grown a multi-million-dollar operation that went from 2 people to 19 people by moving from rented land to an owned property. Now, this means if you're going to do this well, you have to have a remarkable email newsletter. Look at your email newsletter that you're sending out now. Is it just sales information? If it's just sales and product and service related, people aren't going to be opening it. People don't care. So how do you make people care? You have to focus on their pain points. So look, the number one thing you could probably do right now is say, how good is our email newsletter? Is your team, is your executive team actually reading your email newsletter? And if you look at the business model of, this is a BuzzFeed business model, they were so attached to social media for all those years. They didn't have any email subscribers. They started moving from rented land, Facebook and Twitter, into owned properties, more controlled properties like email newsletter. Now they have over 60 email newsletters. They've gotten their business model back. The same thing in the States has happened to the New York Times. They revolutionized their model. Everyone talks about their digital subscriptions and that saved them. Yeah, but what really saved them was their 70 plus different targeted email newsletters that they're sending out to different groups of people. It's amazing. My friend John Lee Dumas created a site called Entrepreneurs on Fire. He's a great podcast, and he was concerned because he just has a podcast. He doesn't have control over all that distribution because of Spotify and Apple and those other distribution methods. So he's like, well, we want to get those listeners to subscribe to my email newsletter list. So that's the smart thing. That's what smart media operators, content marketers are doing. So you've built that base. You're building that audience of more controlled subscribers, and now is the time where you can really push forward with revenue. And in the Content Inc. revenue model, once you build a loyal audience, there's actually 10 different ways to drive revenue. And whether you might be thinking, hey, I'm not a media company, I can't sell advertising. I actually believe that the difference between a media company and a marketing organization, somebody that sells products and services, the business model when it comes to content is the same. You just have your decision on what you want to make, on how you want to monetize. I believe that the more different types of monetization you have, the more diversified you are, the safer you're going to be, and you're going to take a lot of risk off the table. So we're going to talk about these as we go. I'm just going to give quick examples of each one so you know what I'm talking about. So first one is, once you build that loyal audience, you could say, oh, I can sell sponsorship. At Content Marketing Institute, we sold banners and buttons, advertising on our site. We had sponsored webinars that we would sell, educational webinars. We had a print magazine that we would sell advertising in. So lots of different ways to sell sponsorship. As long as it makes sense, it's not too intrusive, you can absolutely fund a content program that way. Then you might say, okay, well, what about conferences and events? It's a great way to do it. If you look at Salesforce, before COVID-19 hit, Dreamforce was almost valued at $1 billion all by itself, Salesforce's event. They had a smaller event this year. I'm sure they'll come back bigger. I think that I'm very, very bullish on what's happening in in-person events once we get through this pandemic period. So there's a huge opportunity for you to monetize your program and build closer relationships with an audience through events. Let's say premium content. We create books, My Book Like Content Inc., or audiobook like Killing Marketing, and we sell those and monetize it that way, as well as getting good content into the hands of our audience. Maybe donations is a model you look at. Maybe what you're trying to do, your mission is so altruistic, you want to get people to donate and they're willing to do it. There's many sites, but a site like Mother Jones in North America where they have donate at every article, because then that's how they generate. Wikipedia, of course, is the same way. Maybe affiliate program is the way you want to go, where you have links, and when people click on those links, they go ahead and you get money if they sign up for something. John Lee Dumas, back to Entrepreneurs on Fire, that's exactly what he does. A large portion of his revenue comes from affiliate links. And then the last of the direct forms are subscription. So my friend Brian Clark created Copyblogger. If you wanted a membership program to his SEO and writing education, you can pay $4.95 a year and get all this amazing training. So these are the things that you could do as a marketer. Absolutely, there's an opportunity to do this. And then what we want to do is we want to look at the indirect ways, the four on the outside. And the way this works is these are content marketing KPIs, or key performance indicators. And this, if you're working for a company and you're not a media company, let's say, these are the four on the outside you're going to want to look at to measure yourself. So the first one is in products. And we'll go back to Indium's example, right? How does Indium show return on the effort of the 27 engineers blogging on a regular basis? They do that because it's the number one lead generation source and new business source for that organization. Maybe it's services. Maybe you have some kind of consulting services. This was big for us when we had Content Marketing Institute. We would basically get all kinds of leads in for our consulting service. We never had to go out and sell to bring people in for leads, because it was just, the business was just falling at our feet from consulting because of all the great content we were sending out there. So maybe services is something you're looking at. Maybe you're looking at keeping loyal customers. If you look at John Deere, the large manufacturing equipment, they created the Furrow magazine back in 1895. Why are they still creating this today? Because people that get the Furrow magazine, which is all about being more profitable as a farmer, new technology methods as a farmer, we know that those people that read the Furrow magazine end up buying more what? John Deere products. So that's really important. And then the last one is better customers. How do you create a better customers? How do you create better yield on what you're selling? So that's a great content marketing method, one of my favorites. So how do you find the most profitable customers? And this is Think Money magazine from TD Ameritrade, the financial services company. So they send this magazine out to traders that trade a lot. And what they want traders to do is trade more often. So what they found out is that those traders that get this magazine and read it trade 5 times more than those that don't get it. That's huge return. So these are the types of things that we can do once you build a loyal audience, and you can start to change behavior in a way that will help your overall business. So as I round this out, I want to give you a word of warning that if you're looking for short-term success, it doesn't happen in 6 to 9 months. You can't do a content marketing campaign. It's not a thing. A content marketing is a marathon, not a sprint. So it takes generally about 18 months for you to really find hard return and to start seeing some of these sales and monetization strategies build for yourself. So you just want to make sure that you understand that it does take time. If you don't have the time, go interrupt people. Go buy advertising. Nothing wrong with that. But if you want to build a long-term asset, you want to make sure you bake in the time to do it. And then the last two, diversification. So you've built your one platform, right? Now it's time, as you built that audience, now you can diversify like a media company would. Sony's a really good example. They have a site called Alpha Universe. So they started with just a blog. So they built their audience on the blog, and then they said, great, now we're going to diversify into a podcast. So they diversified there. And then they said, oh, now we want to do some in-person events at camera stores. So they started to do that and build their audience there. And then they started their own paid training program called Alpha Sessions. Very simple program, all on trying to help the photographer become better at what they do and taking better pictures and leveraging Sony information. And at the end of the day, what does this do? More people buy Sony cameras. Maybe you don't want to build it organically. Maybe you want to diversify by buying organizations. That's happening a lot in North America and Europe right now.
you have marketing automation, billion-dollar marketing automation. HubSpot, they found The Hustle. The Hustle is a newsletter to entrepreneurs, to 1.5 million people, and they spent $27 million US to buy HubSpot, to buy The Hustle. So this is something where if you have the money on the sidelines, you should be making your list, make your wish list of media competitors, YouTubers, podcasters, newsletter providers. And you might say, look, instead of waiting the 18 months or the year plus that it's going to take to build an audience, maybe we go out and buy that. And the last step is basically, how do you become that Red Bull media house, right? How do you do that? And I love this example of Arrow Electronics. They're in the electronics distribution space. So Arrow is like, how do we become the leading expert for business-to-business electronics engineers? And they went out and they created in some cases, and in other cases, they went out and purchased 50 plus platforms, these different media brands that you're seeing in front of you. They went out and bought those for the most part. They have over 3 million subscribers. And if you say, who's the largest media company in the B2B electronic space? It's not a media company. Who is it? It's Arrow Electronics. And they sell electronics equipment. So it's amazing what happened. And of course, they love to use Red Bull Media House, especially because they followed the model. They started with just the print magazine, and now they've got an amazing content pool that they syndicate from. They have this amazing video collection that they monetize in multiple ways. They've got a bunch of different licensing programs, music programs, and television programs coming up. And if you said, well, what's more valuable? Is it Red Bull or Red Bull Media House? I don't know, right? So it's a really good question. And that's where you're at, where you have the opportunity to create something that's amazing, that can drive the research and development, that can drive new product development and new revenue streams that you never thought of before. But my warning again is this: make the choice to do it or not do it, because it does take time. You can't dabble. You can't do it as a side project. So that's why we want to focus on being great at one thing, focus on one audience when you start, and then you can take the next level as you go and you build that audience going on. So the last thing, we'll get into this a little bit before we go, and then we'll get into questions. But you want to get very, very specific with your audience. So figure out how you can truly be different. Create that content mission statement, really start there, and then think of activities that you can stop doing so that you can focus on being great at one or two things. So back to Joe, and then I went on and talked about all the other things that I'm doing and calls to action and whatnot. But hopefully you got a lot out of this presentation that I gave. And I just, again, want to wish you the best of holidays, a happy new year. Hopefully this is a good way to take your content to the next level by maybe thinking about doing less and making more out of what you're creating from a content perspective, and really focusing on those 100 true fans, or as Kevin Kelly puts it, 1,000 true fans for 2022. My best to you, and I'll talk to you next week.